Welcome to the Gentleman Project Podcast. I'm Cory Moore.
And I'm Kirk Chugg. Today we have Ryan Lee with us. Ryan is an entrepreneur. He helps people in their financial lives to become more free. We're going to let him talk about some of that, but really to live a more intentional life. And that's what we talk about on the podcast, is trying to be more intentional with the time that we have, the time that we have with our kids, the time that we spend at home, and how we can do that more intentionally. So we're really excited to talk to Ryan today about how he has taught that and how he lives that with his family. So welcome to the podcast, Ryan.
What's up, guys? It is such a pleasure, such an honor to be on with you. I love the message, love the movement, and just really grateful to be part of it with you today.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you for joining us. So Ryan is, if you look Ryan up on the internet, he is like a super high energy guy. He was introduced to us by Randy Garn, who is the super high energy guy. And Cory and I said, I think this is probably, right in line with Randy's energy. So it'll be a great podcast today. So Ryan, tell us a little bit about your family. Tell us where you come from, and a little bit of your background growing up.
Yeah, man, love it. So for me, I'm a Utah guy through and through. I was born in Provo and spent a lot of my youth in Utah. We moved around a little bit, but Utah was always home. I graduated, went to school, did all the things I was supposed to do, right? I went to school, got my job, I did all of that stuff, but I realized, man, I got stuck on a path that just wasn't fulfilling for me. And today I'm a father of three. And, I'll never forget, I learned some pretty difficult lessons about what really matters. Trying to balance and juggle professional life and personal life, being a father, being a husband, being a provider, and putting all three of those together. It turned into kind of a perfect trifecta of disaster for me that, opened me up to learning some lessons.
So talk to us a little bit about those lessons, Ryan. I think anyone who's in the business world, and I go to a lot of different networking things, anyone who's in the business world, it comes up constantly, this work-life balance, and how do I do it, and how do I find more time, and how do I, so talk to us a little bit about that epiphany and then what you did going forward.
Yeah, that's a great question, Cory. I appreciate that. I went to school. For me, it's kind of interesting. I ended up dropping out of high school, right? I mean, school wasn't my thing. I dropped out of high school, kind of messed around with life for a little while. And then when I finally got my big boy pants on and decided to grow up, without ever questioning it, I knew you just go to school. That was like ingrained. I didn't question that reality. So I went to school, not with the intention of going to school, but with the intention of checking it off a box, right? And I got my 4-year degree in 2 years, and I landed in the corporate world. And I'll never forget that after 2 weeks of being in the corporate world, I had to move out of Utah. I moved from Utah down to Tucson, Arizona, and later on to Texas. And I got my first paycheck, and what should have been validating was the exact opposite for me. I looked at that paycheck, and after all the taxes and deductions and all the things came out that I had no idea what they were until I got the paycheck, like I was making less money with a college degree than I was as an entrepreneur, a side hustler, paying my way through college. And I remember sitting on the stairway. It was the Bank of America in Tucson, Arizona. I remember going in to cash the check because it was back in the day when you got a check in an envelope and you opened it up. And I was going in and I thought to myself, I should just quit, right? This is not enough money. This isn't worth it for me. And I remember making a decision. I didn't understand what that decision was in the moment, but I decided at that moment, I'm just going to go as fast as I can. I'm going to make as much money as I can, thinking that money was the solution and money would be the answer to the life that I wanted, right? And over the next 4 or 5 years, I climbed the corporate ladder as fast as I could. And it was really fun in the beginning because every promotion came with, more money. And more responsibility and titles and all that kind of stuff. But, about 5 years in, I found myself in a position where I had nearly lost everything I cared about in the pursuit of one day, in the pursuit of money. And I kept telling myself that this was what I was supposed to be doing and that was my role as a father. But I found myself living in a different state than my family. I lived in Indianapolis. They were in Texas at the time. And they had moved with me so much that on this particular move, it was just a commute. I would just commute back and forth, red eye in and out. And even though I was there physically on the weekends, I wasn't ever really there. And I had a 4-year-old son at the time. And when he was born, he had a heart defect. And we knew about it. I'm kind of an optimist by nature, and I was optimistic that everything was going to work out. And over the years, doctors were indicating that, yes, it was working out. But I'll never forget the day I got a call from my wife, and she told me on the phone that Doug was going to need an emergency open heart surgery. And man, at that moment, I felt like a failure in every aspect of my life. I had made money, but it was in 2008, I just lost almost everything I'd made in the stock market. I didn't live in the same state as my family when they needed me the most. And that plane ride coming back and those 2 weeks in the hospital, it changed everything for me. I was grateful my son, who's now 14, so 10 years out, I was grateful that he made it out healthy and strong. But it gave me an opportunity to really evaluate my life and what the priorities I wanted to make in my life were. And at that moment, I was way out of balance. And I kept telling myself when I had checked off all the professional boxes and made all the money I needed to make, everything would be perfect. But I was losing what I really cared about in the pursuit of money. And that opened me up to a whole different path in life that ultimately leads me here to talking to the two of you today. I didn't see it in the beginning, but shifting my priority to being my family first, being a good husband, being a good father, took me down a completely different course of my life.
What a cool story to start out the podcast. Some of those sticking points where you can say, my life changed at this moment with that plane ride home to come back and see Doug. So that was the story. We talked about the how. How did you do it?
Yeah.
What were the steps that you took to recenter your life with the people in your life that mean the most? What was that conversation like with your wife?
Yeah.
And how did you guys go about changing everything about the direction that you were headed?
Man, that's a great question. Holy cow, that's a good question, Kirk. So I remember specifically, vividly, I was in the hospital with my son and, I was wheeling him around the hospital in a wheelchair. And, he was 4 at the time. And my son, man, he's so smart. He's way smarter than I am. And I remember like back in the day, even today, he loves to invent things. He's built robots that invent, that solve Rubik's Cubes. He just loves to invent things. And I remember I was wheeling him around the hospital in a wheelchair and talking to him. And I was talking to myself, I think, more than anything. I was trying to just reestablish a relationship with my little son there. And I remember the hospital had 2 wings, and there was a bridgeway that connected both wings of the hospital. And the bridgeway had windows that looked out over the city. And it was at night. And I led I was walking my son, and we stopped at this bridgeway and we looked out over the city. And I asked Doug, I said, Doug, what are you going to do with this new release, this new lease that you have on life? And, I can't remember what he said. He said something to the effect that I'm going to invent something or make something, out of Legos. And for me, I told him verbally and made a commitment internally. And I did it without knowing that's what it was, but I remember how I felt when I said it. I said, I'm going to be your father. And I was his father, but I didn't act like his father. And I remember how powerful those words, because I just said, I'm going to be your father. And I remember that led me for the next couple of weeks and now ultimately for years, it led me to think what that actually means, because I kept telling myself that being a father was providing, and that's part of it. Like there's a tremendous amount of responsibility to ensure that your family has the means necessary to live a safe and comfortable life. And for me, though, that was out of balance. I put that first and my family second. And when I said that commitment to my son, it ultimately opened up the possibility that my attention and my commitment and my priorities had to be number one, my family. And money had to come secondary to taking care of my family. My profession, what I decided to do with my time had to come secondary to being a successful father. And you can define success however you want it. I wanted to be more present. I didn't live with my family when they needed me the most. I was traveling so much. I missed them and I was gone a lot. And just making that present commitment of saying, I'm going to be your father, opened me up to saying, look, I need to focus my time, my effort, and my attention on spending time, on being there with my family. And that caused me to shift what I did professionally. Rather than traveling and managing big teams, I ended up coming back home and working, in a localized area. And for me, I do a lot of stuff financially. Like my big thing was I wanted to not be beholden to an employer and a salary and all that kind of stuff. And that's ultimately the business that I run today. But it's all been centered on family first. I believe financial freedom is important because our time is our most important asset. And inside of our company, we talk about, look, we can always evaluate return on investment, but the best return you can get is a return on your attention. And using your money to buy your time and your attention is the most important thing you can do. So you can focus that attention as a family man, focus it on what matters most, your family. And so that's really how it came about, is just by making a declaration. And then over time, just changing what I considered to be the number one priority was. And, if you've read the book, Going from Good to Great, oftentimes all the good things, they stand in the way of the most important things, the great things. Yep. And to get great, oftentimes we have to let go of good. And that's I just went on a process of letting go of some really, really good things in the pursuit of something great.
Okay, so let's make this personal for the people that listen to the podcast. Say your son hasn't had an open heart surgery and you don't have that bookmark moment in your life that you have an opportunity to have that conversation. What would you say to people who maybe aren't living a present life with their kids right now, that want to? How do you start that conversation with your wife or with your kids and say, listen, nothing's happened in our life right now that's like life-changing or a new lease on life, like you put it. How do you start?
Man, that's such a good question, Kirk. And I think this is such a relevant topic for all of us. I mean, we live in one of the most, not one of the most abundant time in the history of this world. Like the abundance that's around us is just overwhelming. And we've almost become complacent by it. We've almost learned to take it for granted. In fact, in many cases, I think we do take it for granted. We feel like the abundance that we have is the minimum standard of living. And so in order to create this awareness, I think one of two things has to happen. Life will give you experiences that will force urgency into your awareness. Or if you don't want to wait for life to create a big hole for you to fall into, you've got to find a way to manufacture urgency. And one of the best ways to do that, we ask this to everyone that comes into our company. We ask them, what do you want? And that sounds like a really simple question, right? But after asking this thousands of times to thousands of different people, I can almost name on two hands the people that have been able to answer that very question. Most people know what they don't want, but they have very little idea of what they do want. And they've deferred this idea of what they want to someday. And that someday never comes. And in the waiting for the someday, life passes them by and they live a life of regrets because they never really got clear on what they want. So I think to answer your question, Kirk, it's getting clear on what you want and why, mentally and emotionally connected to that thing. And then asking yourself the most powerful question: who do I have to become? Because the only difference between the results that I have today and the results that I want to live a more ideal life is I have to become someone different, someone more capable of pulling those results and creating those results with my family, the relationship with my wife, with my kids. I have to become someone different. And so knowing what I want, knowing why I want it, and who I have to become, those have become the driving questions of my life. And I try to constantly, every 90 days, manufacture urgency to say, look, what am I going after? How do I want my life to be different 90 days from now, and the next 90 days, and the next 90 days? And just getting clearer and clearer on this vision that constantly expands as you expand as a person.
That's great, Ryan. How old are your kids now?
Doug, the son who had heart surgery, he's 14 now. And it's so fun. He's almost 15. And, so we're having a whole different types of conversations than I did with him back in the day at 4 years old in the hospital. So I've got a 14-year-old son, I've got a 13-year-old daughter, and then a 9-year-old son. So I've got 3 kids in that age range.
Okay. Your kids and my kids are very similar. I have a daughter who's about to turn 15, a 12-year-old boy and an 8-year-old girl. I'm starting to ask myself the question of, how do I start getting them prepared for that vision, right? So I want to ask you, as our kids are turning kind of that 13, 14, 15, they can start to understand, hey, you can become anything you want to be. And you need to define who you want to be. And you need to define what you want, right? And that's going to change, and it doesn't have to be set in stone by any means, kids. But I kind of want to create this sense of urgency, as you called it, with some of my kids now. Again, not that they're going to not change that. They will 100 times, and probably should, because life's going to change and their desires are going to change. Any thoughts on how do you start instilling this idea of you can create your own destiny with your kids? Any process, systems, conversations, books, anything like that?
Yeah, I love that. I mean, lots of different things. One of the things that we do inside of our company, and it came from, I'm trying to remember what the book is. I think it's called A Purpose-Driven Life. So we built a whole course around what we call the Purpose-Driven Life, and I'm pretty sure it came from the book, The Purpose-Driven Life. But really, it's about kind of reverse engineering, going from the end to the present. And, one of the things that I found difficult in the beginning is knowing what we want. It's this vague thing, right? And it's really hard to know what you want until you've experienced an element of what you want and what you don't want. And that kind of helps crystallize that vision. But one of the things that I like to do in this idea of the purpose-driven life is you have an ideal life, and that's kind of your North Star. That just keeps you on track to this bigger vision. And it might not be defined, but what I can define is what I want in the next 90 days. And in the purpose-driven life, I talked a lot about this idea of breaking things down into, yes, you have a big goal. You have this big, hairy, audacious vision of, I want all these things with my family and connection and health and all this stuff. But what do I want in the next 90 days? That's close enough to me that I understand where I'm at today. And 90 days from now, I don't know all the things that are going to happen, but I can forecast pretty accurately 90 days from now. So if I start breaking it down that way, it becomes so much easier to set those clear targets. And that's what we do with our kids, right? We every 90 days, we have a target that they're working on. And sometimes it's educational. Sometimes it's physical. Like for my daughter, for example, she's really, really excited about lacrosse. And she wants to be a good lacrosse player. But part of becoming a good lacrosse player is being in condition, right? And so right now, who she needs to become is more conditioned. So she's running 2 miles every single day to help her become who she says she wants to be. And so, setting these close range targets, and then family dinners become a great opportunity to check in. How's it going? How have you made progress? Where did you fall short? What are you doing to overcome that gap? And then, if we all know each other's goals, like the dinner table is an amazing time to support each other on, oh, hey, I'll come run with you tomorrow, or maybe I'll ride my bike while you're running. And, if I know what Desmond's goals are and Desmond knows what my goals are, Desmond's another one of my sons, we can help support each other as a family in rising up and achieving those goals together. So close range targets, big vision, but close range targets, and then living it, right? I mean, it's one thing to put it on paper, but if you never revisit it or never come back and talk about it, the likelihood of it actually happening is very, very small.
Yeah, I love that. The family dinners and the check-ins, right? How powerful is that when your kids know what your goals are, right? And they can hold you accountable, because I don't care what you say. When a kid asks you if you've done what you say you're going to do, that's more powerful than any other person in the world asking you that question.
Dude, that's totally
because you want to set that example to them, right? So how powerful of a tool that would be. Why don't we use that more? I love that. I'm going to use that.
And we write it down. So we've created, one of the things that we did, I don't know, this has been several years ago, we created a family crest. And that crest is our words, our core values, and then symbols, pictures that visually and then verbally represent who we want to be known for in the world, right? This is when I come and I say, hey, I'm Ryan Lee, my goal would be, I know who Ryan Lee is based on his family crest, based on his history, based on who he proclaims himself to be. And my kids, I want that, because that's how people used to be known back in the day, is, I represent this family, and this family stands for these things. So we've tried to instill that into our family, and it's such a fun thing. It's so far from perfect, but it gives us a fun framework to work within.
Would you mind sharing that with us?
Yeah, the family crest framework.
Yeah, what are your words that you use in the family crest to define the Lee family?
Love that. I've got a picture of it right over there, but it's strength, it's honor, it's happiness, it's fun, and it's adventure. And so those are the 5 things that we stand for. And we set little targets in those areas. And, the fun thing is the targets can be anything. What does it mean to be strong? Well, I might think I want to, my daughter, she needs to be stronger physically to be better lacrosse. My youngest son, he was really struggling with math this year. And so his biggest thing was strength in his mental capabilities, exercising his mind to be able to understand how math works and how it applies to his life. So these characteristics, they give us a framework. These are values that we can identify to say, look, this is the absolute. How do we become incrementally better towards that absolute? And how do we have shirts and hats with it. And we talk about how we're progressing as a family, some of the things we can do better as a family. So the family crest has been an amazing framework for us to work underneath and just to open up the space to have conversations. And when we have an identified and agreed on core set of values, we can all talk about those values and we can all help hold each other accountable to those values. And just like you said, Kirk, if I'm saying as the father, I'm going to lead this, it helps hold me to a higher standard as well.
I love that. I'm going to steal your family crest idea. I have some family crests that I've, through generations I've found, through the genealogy kind of stuff. And so I'm going to take one of those and and copy you. That's awesome.
Putting
Ryan.
that together was one of the funnest experiences of our life. I mean, we spent a quarter, because we do everything in 90-day targets, and we spent 90 days hiking up in the mountains of Utah, talking about words that we liked and what they meant, and do we really want to try to become that? Are we that? Is it an aspiration, or is it a likelihood that we can be that type of person? And we talked about these words. We had big lists of words, and then we identified and defined what they each meant. We narrowed it down over time into the words that we wanted. And then we picked symbols, pictures that went with each one of those words. And we drew up the best, we could, what we thought a family crest might look like. And then we gave it to a company, an online company, 99 Designs, and all these designers competed for what design would be the best. And man, it was so fun. And then we ended up with the crest, and we put it on shirts, and we went on a big trip to celebrate. And then we've just used that framework, and we've refined it a couple times now over the last couple of years. Maybe we want a different word in there. Maybe the symbol needs to be a little bit different as we've had more experience truly living, these words. And it's just been a fun framework to work underneath of, look, this is who we say we're going to be. This is what we're trying to become. And now every 90 days, how do we set a target as a family to elevate each one of us closer towards that ideal?
I love that. It's so intentional. And what you've done is you've created a family culture, and you've created the framework in which to have the conversations that are important. And that's your gentleman project. You created a gentleman project at your house, and you're getting to share it with everybody who's listening to the podcast today. That is the reason that we're doing the podcast, is to share ideas like that with everybody who listens to the podcast. Because what I did in my home doesn't work for everybody in theirs. And that's not going to work for everybody. But I'll guarantee you, if people implement that and they talk to their kids about creating a family crest, talking about those words, creating a logo or a crest, a piece of artwork, T-shirts. I mean, what better investment could you make into your family culture than that? That's great ideas. Thank you.
No problem. And to talk a little bit more about that, I mean, it's this idea of a family brand. Like all the companies that we admire, all the, the athletes, all these people that we kind of look up to, there's always a brand associated with it, right? And we can identify the company and what they do based on their brand. And, that's back in the day, especially in the European times, that's really how families identified themselves, was they had a brand that represented their family. So it was kind of with that. And then where the idea came from for us to do this, my son and I, the one who had the heart surgery, we go to this event, about every year. The last couple of years have been a little bit different, but it's called a legacy event. And it's a super fun father and son adventure where you're learning through experiences how to just be more manly, right? I mean, start fires and do jujitsu, shoot guns, blow bombs up, just fun things like that. And the event is called Legacy. And I've always found it kind of interesting because, it's 20 fathers and sons out in the mountains somewhere in the US doing something pretty intentional, right? And at the end of the day, we always come around the campfire and we talk about what does a legacy mean? And in the beginning, in fact, almost everyone talked about a legacy as what you leave. And I believe there's a lot of that to it, right? I mean, you're going to leave what you leave, but a legacy and what you leave is really defined by how you live. And, as I was listening to all these fathers, they were super intentional because they were there at this event, but they kept deferring the responsibility of a legacy as one day. It's in the future. It's this whole idea of someday it's all going to, this is what I'll leave. And, this idea of creating a crest was like, look, the legacy will be defined by how we live today. And so let's create the framework to live more intentional, and then let's let the legacy take care of itself.
We've talked to some other executives who've had aha moments where they say, I was spending so much time on my culture, on my values, on where I wanted my company to be in 5 years, but I had never done that at home.
Yeah.
And a big change in focus when these executives go, why am I not doing this at home? I think the Crest idea, that's taken it to the next level, because I don't think we've talked to anyone else on the podcast who said, not only did I do all that, but I branded it, which is so cool. My kids are going to love that. I'm totally going to steal it. I'm going to say Ryan Lee's the man, and they're going to love you, and so they'll have to meet you someday. But I appreciate you sharing that with us.
No problem.
So talk to us a little bit about how you're connecting with your kids, like any traditions or things that you do either on a daily basis or a yearly basis where you say, I'm really going to make sure that these kids know me and know that I love them.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think one of the greatest things has been these quarterly targets that we set. I mean, it's been so fun connecting with them in that way, pushing them and supporting them at the same time, that healthy balance of holding them accountable to what they said they wanted and helping them become strong enough and brave enough oftentimes to do some difficult and uncomfortable things. It's been a tremendously connecting experience over these last 4 years to do that. You know, we always celebrate at the end of the quarter. Sometimes it's a big celebration. Sometimes it's as simple as just going out for a dinner and an ice cream cone, right? But it's, you know, kind of that Pavlov response of, hey, we put a lot of work in. We sacrificed. We could have done all these other good things, but we sacrificed good for great. Let's celebrate it. Let's you know, validate it. And then, you know, those emotional feelings towards that work kind of inspires to go out and do it again. Like we want that same positive outcome of, yes, what we accomplished, but also the celebration of as well. So those quarterly targets have been huge for our family. One of the biggest things that I've done, I think, as a father, and this has also been at the same time that we started this family brand, is I believe it's really, really important to connect with your kids one-on-one. And I believe it's really important to do it as a father to a child. Right? There's a different vibe. There's a different connection when my wife and I are talking to our kids together than when I'm talking to my kids. Right? And so every year I have a very, very intentional father-son or father-daughter experience. And we leave, like we get out and we go do something. It's usually over a weekend, sometimes a little bit longer. But we'll go do some type of an adventure that's relevant and exciting for that individual. And, you know, for my oldest son, there's been a lot of, you know, these man camps, as well as we're going out to the Space Center this year because he loves space and loves machinery and all that kind of stuff. But I you know, we have very intentional conversations during that time based on the state of life that they're in, right? My oldest son is a teenager. We've been talking more about dating lately and driving and, you know, what it's going to take for him to get to the college that he wants to go to. So those experiences allow us to get out of our normal environment, to have very, you know, different types of conversations. It's not, hey, did you do your homework? Did you clean the house? You know, it's not talking about the day to day. It's talking about the big picture of who you are and what you want and where you're going and how I, as a father, can help support that. You know, it's been a great opportunity. And then I film almost all of it. Like I'll just have a camera on as much as I can. And then I've got a film editor and I'll just give him all the pictures and all the film and he'll put together little highlight trailers. And I love it because like the kids love those trailers. It documents the experience. And they love the trailer almost as much as they love the experience because then they get to go back and watch. Oh, remember when mom, you know, when dad took me to the Taylor Swift concert, or remember when dad checked me out of school and we went to this man camp and we blew up bombs. You know, they love going back and watching these. We call them legacy videos. And so that's been a really, really fun experience to connect individually with the child, to document it in a way, and then to preserve it in a way that it's meaningful and it's actually fun for them to watch after it was relived. And we almost can relive the experience over and over.
Killer.
So, Ryan, you've talked a lot about intentionality today, and you probably have an answer to this question right off the top of your head. But if you were to pick 3 qualities that you wanted your kids to internalize to be successful in life or to leave the legacy that you want them to be able to leave on the world, what would those 3 things be?
I love that. I believe number 1, it's God. Helping them understand that they're here for a purpose. Their life matters. Right. And they've been given unique talents and gifts, not to hide, but to serve. Right. And when they find those gifts and tap into those gifts and understand that their life has meaning and purpose, they find fulfillment. So number 1, it's helping give my kids a bigger perspective of who they are and why they're here. Number 2, it's family. There's nothing that matters more outside of your relationship with God than your family. They're the ones that know you the best. They're the ones that are always there for you, for better or for worse, right? And so it's number 1, being connected with God. Number 2, having a strong sense of commitment and duty towards your family. And then number 3, having a strong sense of personal identity. And I think one of the biggest challenges that kids, even adults, face today is they don't know who they are. They don't know what they stand for. And if you don't know who you are and what you stand for, it's very easy to be swayed one way or the other. And we see it all the time in the world today that people are just so confused. And I think those 3 things, like those 3 values, if you know that, you know, your life has meaning, that there is a bigger power to your life that is encompassed in the word God, right? And that family is there to support you. That's the infrastructure here on earth to help support you. And then that you personally have an identity, have an individual identity and who you are and why you're here. Those 3 things have been tremendously valuable, kind of just frameworks to discuss, you know, the purpose of life, why you're here, who you are, and where you're going.
Fantastic answer, Ryan. Already an amazing podcast. What are some things where you look back and go, because we learned some of our biggest lessons when we did it wrong. And you talked about a little bit about that when your son was 4 and you changed your focus and your direction in life. Any other lessons learned where if you to go back, you would have done it different, but you're thankful for the lesson?
Yeah. Honestly, it's being comfortable with failure. I think that's such a big challenge for us as humans, right? That everything has to be perfect, and we wait to start some of the most important things until it's perfect. And there is never a perfect time. There is never a perfect idea, and there's never a perfect opportunity. And so one of the biggest lessons I've learned over the years, the family crest, it was so we kind of put together a course and documented this because we had a lot of families wonder how we did it. But it was really dumb. It was on a yellow legal paper that we drew this out, and we had all these words. It was so simple. We wrote down words as we hiked in the mountains. We then drew pictures of what we thought those words meant. And then we drew a picture of what, if we put it all together in a shield or a symbol, what would it look like? That was the first part of a family crest. And it wasn't perfect, but it was super fun. So stop waiting for the perfect time. There is never a perfect time. And the more you wait, the more you miss, right? Because if there's one thing that experience with my son and several experiences since then have taught me, life is short. I don't know how much time I'm going to have as a father. And I want to maximize that time that I have right now, because this might be the last day. And my legacy is defined by how I act imperfectly right now.
Love it. So
there's a lot of wisdom in that.
Yeah, amen. Do you have any other, outside of the family crest, do you have any other mottos or things that you guys talk about? Like, hey, the Lees do this.
Yeah.
Right. Do you have things like that?
The Lees do hard things. We can do hard things. And we adopted that from, what's his name? Josh Latimer. He's someone you should have on your podcast. They run a really, really cool program for families, for entrepreneurs, and, trying to combine the chaos of being an entrepreneur and a father at the same time, and having a family at the same time. And they talk about this idea that you can do hard things all the time. And my daughter, who's now 13, 2 years ago, she was invited to speak on stage in front of 5,000 people. Crazy. A 11-year-old speaking on stage in front of 5,000 people. And it was a huge opportunity, right? But man, she was so scared. She had to get on an airplane and fly. I was already at the place that she was going to come. And so it was kind of a last minute thing. So she had to get on an airplane, fly by herself, meet me out in Nashville, and then come speak on the stage the next day. And I'll never forget, she almost backed out. And one of the biggest things that I think we as humans do is we get out of the present moments, and we either go to the future or go to the past. And if we're in the future, we're in a state of anxiety. If we're in the past, we're usually in a state of depression, right? But when you're in the present, things are never as bad as you tell yourself they are, right? And so just reminding yourself that it's just taking one more step, right? You can do something hard. And the Latimers called up my daughter and gave her a little pep talk, and that since sent her a big towel that says, hey, you can do hard things. And that's become the mantra of our family. But Kiana got on a plane and she flew from Salt Lake City, Utah to Nashville, Tennessee by herself. That was a hard thing. Then when she landed in the airport, I picked her up, and that night we prepared her speech that she was going to deliver the next day in front of 5,000 people. She had never spoken in front of anyone outside of maybe her parents and her friends, right? And so that was a cool, big, hard thing. And at the end of that, man, it didn't matter what she said. It was an amazing speech, but she was way off. Like, she didn't hit all the points that she wanted to hit. But man, it didn't matter, right? That one experience has changed her psyche and what she's capable of doing. It's changed her confidence. It's given her more opportunities than had she not got on that plane, had she let the stories, hold her back from doing something that was hard, her life would be different. And so, whenever we're doing something in life, whether it's, hey, we're going to go ride our bike and we're going to ride a little bit further this time than we did last time, or we're going to, go speak in front of 5,000 people or anything in between, just reminding ourselves that we are capable of more than we give ourselves credit for. We can do hard things.
That's very cool. We've talked so much on the podcast about this, like resiliency and stick-to-itiveness. And we literally have a big wooden sign in our kitchen that says, we do hard things. We love that saying as well. And it's kind of just become our thing as well. So I think that there is a lot of lessons to be learned throughout that, because it's not just don't give up. It's take the first step.
Yeah.
And it's not just take the first step, it's follow through, keep your word. Like, there's so many good lessons that come out of we can do hard things. So thanks for sharing that. That's That's an awesome story. And I'll bet it's going to be a launch pad for her and something that she remembers the rest of her life.
She's been featured in a book because of that single experience, and she's launched a little teeny business that has the potential to be something huge, helping other young teenager with anxiety, right? Because she was struggling. I mean, she's always struggled with anxiety. And so it gave her the confidence to open more and talk about anxiety. And a lot of times the solution, the holistic solution, is getting out of the future, getting out of the past, getting in the present, and doing something hard. And so it's helped her launch a little teeny business that's fulfilling for her. It's a great creative outlet for her, and it has the potential to be something huge or not. But it was that one experience that opened it up for her.
I love it.
Hey, Ryan, I wanted to ask you, you're a very impressive guy. I've liked the podcast so far. I want to ask you, do you have any mentors or heroes in your life that you say, oh man, this person really helped me become the person I am today? And if so, why do you feel that way about them?
Yeah, that's such a good question. Yeah, there's a few for sure. There's a great book out there, Who Not How. I think oftentimes when we're stuck, it's not trying to figure out how to do it. It's figuring out who's done it and then model that behavior. And so for me, the last 6-7 years, as I've been launching a business and stepping into all these areas of just uncertainty into my life, I've become more and more comfortable and confident finding the who that's done it and learning from them. And it's been so amazing to learn from people. You mentioned Randy Garn earlier. Randy's been a mentor of mine now for the last year, and the last year I've spent with him has changed my life. I've spent time with a serial entrepreneur, Russell Brunson. I didn't know how to launch an online company back in the day. And so I found the who did. And in the beginning, I thought, oh, I can't do it. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I can barely even turn on my computer. How do I have an online company? Right. And so, getting all these who's in my life has really been awesome. And sometimes those who's come and go and they're there for the moment. I think one of the mentors that I have to lean back on a lot is my father. I was blessed with an amazing father, and he's taught me so many lessons that are the antithesis of everything I've learned from almost the entire business world. He's taught me the humility, quiet, hard work, do what you say you're going to do, honor your word. And, I've gone back to my father over and over and over again over the years for advice, because he brings to me some of that very practically. Grew up on a farm, grew up a wrestler, and is a man of very few words. And so when you get him to say the words, man, those words have meaning, they have impact, and he means what he says. And so my father's been a great mentor throughout my life as well.
I have a feeling you're not a man of few words. Do you get that from your mom, or is that something that you learned over time, or was it just natural?
I don't know how my mom and dad, how they did that. My mom is a serial entrepreneur. She's creative. She's bouncing from one thing to the next. I'm a lot like her. But I'm a lot like her, outwardly, but inwardly, I'm a super introvert. Like it's always the yin and the yang. I love talking to people. I love interacting with people, but at the end, like, I'm drained of all my energy. Like, it just drains me to be out there the way I put myself out there. And so when I recharge, I'm always by myself. I'm usually up in the mountains. I'm usually with my family, those type of things. And that's how my father is. My father's super quiet, very reserved, always off working somewhere quietly, but, doing something very intentional with his life.
That word right there, I think, defines what we've learned on the podcast today. Intentional living, making sure that you know where you want to go, where you are, checking in with yourself and with others to make sure that you're on track to get to where you want to go. That's a powerful, powerful message of intentionality that you've brought to the podcast today. So thank you for that.
So Ryan, you had talked to me before the podcast about some of the entrepreneurial things you're doing with your kids. I think you called it a match. Talk to us about what you do and how did you get that going? Because I am super interested in feeding that entrepreneurial spirit with my kids.
Yeah. So like little bits and pieces, for me, money was never talked about as a kid. It just wasn't. We didn't talk about money. And I felt very disempowered with money because of that, right? And that's kind of how I found myself in that little corporate trap of working for money and thinking money was the ticket out. And it's not. Money is in an inanimate object, right? And it's only a tool in the hands of someone who knows how to use it. And so for my kids, I want them to understand what money is, what it represents, and if they want it, how to get it, right? And it's mystical if you don't know it, but it's simple when you do. And for us, we have a couple of principles that we follow. Principle number one is really simple. Dollars follow value. If you want dollars, how do you go out and create more value? And so they have jobs that they get to do inside of just being part of the family. And we pay them a very small and modest, we call it a commission program for just being an active citizen inside of the Lee family. But the things that they want are more expensive than what I'm just giving them on a weekly basis. And so we have them, I think it's, again, being intentional. Like every quarter, I like to have them set a target. What do you want, right? And each one of them has a target. We print out a little picture and we know how much it costs. And then they know the gap of what they have today and what they have to do to get the thing that they say they want. And so one of the ways that we help the kids enact this dollars follow value, for the two oldest, they can go out and create value. And so if they go out and earn $1 outside of the house, we'll match it $1. Kind of like the employers will match your contribution to a 401k. We'll match their dollar that they earned to incentivize them. Hey, go out and create value for someone else. So my oldest son, he's mowing lawns this summer. He makes pens. So he's making a bunch of pens, and it was really cool. He set a target just last week. So it's this is the first week of summer break, and his target was he wanted to make $2,000 this summer. And so we did a big post on Facebook, and he's making pens, and within, 2 hours, he had enough pre-orders on his pens. He's going to make $1,800 just off his pen orders. Now he's booked for the rest of the summer, pretty much making pens. But, and then we match it, right? And then the match, we don't just give that to him. That's a very intentional thing that goes to either their college, a car, or serving a mission for their church.
I love it. Thanks for sharing that with me. I'm going to take the Crest and that and implement it in my family. So that's cool.
We always end the podcast talking to our guests about what they think it means to be a gentleman. So you've had some time to think about that. Would you like to answer that question?
Yeah, heck yeah. And this has been a really, I've knowing this podcast is coming up, it's been interesting because the last couple of days, last couple of weeks, I've been talking to my oldest son a lot about this idea of dating. He's going to a youth conference this weekend, and we're incentivizing him. And I don't know if this is good or bad. Like, we're literally paying him to talk to a girl because he's so shy. He will not open up his, at the end of the year, I said, look, dude, I will pay you $10 for every signature you get in your yearbook. If it's a girl signature, I'll pay you $10. If it's a boy signature, I'll pay you $5. He had 2 signatures, and that was a monumental feat for him to get those 2 signatures. But we've been talking about this idea of, you need to go put yourself out there. You can do hard things. And what does it mean to be a gentleman, a man, right? And so we talked to him about this. If you're going to dance with a girl, guess what? You look her in the eye. You don't look down to the floor. You don't look up in the sky. You look her in the eye and you have a conversation with her eye to eye. Number 2, if you're going to go anywhere with a girl, you open the door for her. You treat her with respect, right? And so being confident with who you are and being confident enough to look someone in the eye and have a very direct conversation with them. And then when you're interacting with other people, whether it's a girl or someone else, treat them with respect, right? Open the door for them. Show that you honor them, not by what you say, but by how you act. So those are 2 things for me, I think, that are very, very critical to being a gentleman, right? Being confident enough to shake someone's hand, to look them in the eye and to say, look, this is who I am and this is what I do. And then when you're interacting with people, treat them with respect. I think one of the biggest things the world is missing today is we don't respect people today. I mean, we're so concerned about being right that we forget that we're not getting what we want. And so getting what we want is letting down your ego, putting down your guard, and just treating other people with respect. And it's a simple thing to do, but man, it makes such a big difference.
Yeah. Awesome.
That's a great answer. The world needs a little more respect and a little more Ryan Lee.
Appreciate that, Cory.
Well, thank you for joining us today, Ryan. It's been an honor to talk to you. Lots of good takeaways from me personally, and hope that the people that have listened to the podcast have got those same takeaways. If somebody wants to connect with you outside of the podcast, how do they do so, Ryan?
Yeah, I'm pretty active on social media. I'm on, Instagram. I'm the Ryan D. Lee, I think. I don't even know what I am. I'm Ryan Lee on Instagram. I'm Ryan Lee on Facebook. I run a company called Cashflow Tactics. Those are the areas that you connect with me outside of the podcast. That was awesome, guys. I appreciate you taking the time with me today. It was an honor to be on your podcast.
If you listen to the podcast and you love it, share it. Head on over to Apple Podcasts and give us a review if you wouldn't mind. If you enjoy the podcast, that helps more people find us. We hope that you guys have a great week. I'm Kirk Chugg.
And I'm Cory Moore.
Thanks for joining us on the Gentleman Project podcast. We'll talk to you next week.